Okay, Walter Wofford back with the short-term rental cash flow roadmap, and today we got another step. Last video we talked about rental arbitrage, where you don't own the home but you rent it with the right to sublease it, rent a vacant home, then you go furnish it and you put it on Airbnb or other platforms and you make your money off the spread. It's wonderful for scaling fast to do that, and the cash flow is good. The problem is that you don't have any ownership and you don't have any control if the landlord decides they're going to sell the property. So what I'm suggesting to you today is to study this video on the right of first refusal. And all that means is when you're negotiating with the homeowner or the landlord, just put this in there. It says, look, if you get an offer on your house, I got a shot at matching it. That's all it is. It's not an option. In the next video, we'll talk about options. But this is a right of first refusal, and it's a way for you to get a path to ownership in the future. Okay, so if you want this ebook, all you got to do is put your phone up and to the QR code, and then tap the link and fill out the information, and you'll immediately receive the ebook. And as always, I've got my AI team helping me with this content. You'll find this one very interesting. Right of first refusal. Okay, one more thing. So if you like these videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and you'll be notified when the next one comes out. Thank you.
Okay, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at something pretty strategic in the short-term rental world. STR arbitrage.
Right. That whole model where you rent a place, furnish it, make it look great, and then sublease it on Airbnb, VRBO, those platforms.
Yeah, the popular way to get into real estate cash flow without actually, buying the property.
Exactly. It's often called asset light. And that's a huge part of why people do it. You don't need that massive down payment.
But that asset light part, leveraging someone else's property, that's also where the big vulnerability is. The material we looked at really flags this.
Oh, absolutely.
Your whole business, the furniture, the brand you built, the photos, those hundreds of five-star reviews, the check-in process you perfected, it's all tied to that address.
Mm-hmm.
So if the landlord suddenly decides, I'm selling,
poof.
Yeah. Your business in that specific location is, well, it's seriously at risk. The new owner might want to live there or rent it long-term or, anything else.
And that risk is why the strategy we're digging into today, the right of first refusal, or ROFR, it can be so important. It's a legal tool, yeah. Some of you actually write into the lease agreement itself.
So our mission here is to really understand what a ROFR actually is, why it's pretty vital if you're serious about STR arbitrage, and crucially, how you get it structured correctly in your lease.
It's about taking that weakness, that vulnerability, and trying to flip it into security, and maybe even a path to actually owning the place eventually.
Turning rent from just an expense into planting a seed.
That's a good way to put it. Planting a seed for future options, future leverage.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. What exactly is a right of first refusal?
So fundamentally, it's a clause in a contract, usually your lease.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you, the tenant, the very first opportunity, the first dibs, really, to buy the property if the owner decides to sell.
Okay, so they can't just list it and sell it to someone else from under me.
Not if you have a ROFR in place, no. They have to come to you first. The usual way it works, the trigger, is when the landlord gets a real legitimate offer from somebody else. A bona fide offer is the legal term.
A serious buyer.
Yep.
A serious buyer, yeah. Before the landlord can accept that offer, they're legally obligated by the ROFR to present it to you on the exact same terms. Price, conditions, everything.
Okay, so I'd have to match whatever that other buyer offered. Exactly.
That's generally how it works, yes.
Yeah.
They basically step into that buyer's shoes. But here's the key thing, the really powerful part. The source material stresses.
Yeah.
It's an option to buy. It's not an obligation. You don't have to buy it if you can't, or if the numbers don't work for you anymore, or whatever. You just have the exclusive right to match the offer before anyone else can.
That optionality.
Yeah.
That feels really important. It's like holding a reservation without having to pay the full price up front. It gives you breathing room.
Precisely. It creates that potential path to ownership, but without the immediate pressure of needing the financing lined up today. It's future-proofing, in a way.
Okay, that makes sense. So now, why is this ROFR clause considered so Essential, maybe, for STR arbitrage specifically. I mean,
Sure.
I'm just renting, right? Shouldn't my focus be purely on, maximizing the income from the short-term stays? Well, yes, maximizing income is the goal, but the ROFR helps protect your ability to keep doing that long-term. See, your investment in an STR arbitrage setup goes way beyond just the monthly rent check.
You mean like the furniture, the setup costs?
Exactly. Furnishing, maybe some light renovations, the decor, creating that specific vibe people book for. Plus, the value tied up in your online presence. The listing itself, all those positive reviews you worked hard to get.
Right, your superhost status, the ranking.
And your operational systems, your house manuals, your cleaning team's workflow, any smart home tech or automations you've implemented, all of that value is tied physically to that one specific property.
Okay, I see. So if the property sells and you have to leave.
You don't just lose the future income stream. You risk losing the value of all that investment. You got to move the furniture. Maybe it doesn't fit the next place. You start from zero with reviews, rebuild your search ranking. It's a huge hit. ROFR gives you a mechanism, a chance to prevent that loss by potentially gaining control of the underlying asset your whole business is built on.
So it's kind of like business insurance almost, but aimed at continuity.
That's a great way to think about it. And it's not just defensive. It actively builds that bridge towards ownership, which is often the next logical step for successful arbitrage operators.
Right, because eventually you might think, why am I paying rent when I could own this cash cow?
Exactly. But the problem is timing, right? How do you get the money ready or the loan approved for the exact moment this property you know so well might become available? It's tough.
Yeah, you can't just keep a mortgage pre-approval active indefinitely waiting for maybe someday.
Right. And this is where the ROFR structure is brilliant. If the landlord does get that third-party offer, the ROFR clause typically gives you a set time frame the source mentioned, like 10 to 15 business days. It's pretty standard.
Okay, a specific window.
A specific window to make your decision and, crucially, to get your ducks in a row financially. That deadline is powerful. It gives you something concrete to take to a lender or potential private money partners.
Or even those specialized retirement accounts.
Self-directed IRAs or Roth IRAs, they can invest in real estate, but they have, procedures and timelines. Having that RFR on window makes it feasible to approach them because there's a defined event and deadline. You're not just speculating.
And the beauty is, you're not evaluating some random property off the MLS.
Not at all. You know this property inside and out. You know its real income potential because you've been generating it. You know the quirks, the repair history, the guest feedback.
You've basically been doing deep due diligence for months or years just by running your business there.
Exactly. So the risk of buying is significantly lower. You're potentially acquiring a proven asset, one you personally optimized.
This sounds like it could also give you a bit of unexpected leverage, maybe even right at the start when you're negotiating the lease.
It absolutely can. And you can actually frame it as a benefit for the landlord, too. It's not just a one-way street.
How so? How's it a win for them?
Well, think about it from their side. If they ever decide to sell, having a ROFR with a good tenant who already knows the property and is potentially interested in buying, that can make their life much easier.
Because they might not have to list it publicly.
Potentially. If you exercise your right, they could avoid the whole hassle and cost of marketing the property, doing tons of showings, vetting buyers, paying realtor commissions, which could be, 5-6% of the sale price. Big savings.
So the pitch when negotiating the lease could be something like, hey, include this RFR, and if you ever sell, you've got a built-in potential buyer right here. Could save you time, money, and headaches.
Precisely that. And landlords, especially ones who are investors themselves, often get that logic. They appreciate seeing a clear, potentially smoother exit path.
And I suppose because you have that relationship and the ROFR exists, maybe they'd come to you before even thinking about listing it, like just a quiet conversation.
That's definitely a possibility. And the material touched on this. If you've been a great tenant, paid on time, kept the place nice, built that rapport, they might just approach you directly.
And in that scenario, maybe you could get creative.
For sure. That direct conversation, outside the pressure of a competing third-party offer, opens doors. You might negotiate a slightly better price since they're saving commission, or maybe they'd agree to sell as without you demanding repairs.
Or even financing things.
Yeah, things like seller financing, where they carry part of the loan for you, or maybe even structuring it as a lease-to-own agreement. These creative solutions are much more likely in a direct deal facilitated by that pre-existing ROFR framework.
Okay, the why is super compelling. It protects the business you've built, it creates a less risky path to owning, it gives you negotiating clout, and might even lead to better deal terms. So let's get practical. How do you make sure this is actually done right in the lease? What are the critical pieces of a good ROFR clause?
Right. The language matters. Based on what we reviewed, there are several key components you absolutely need spelled out clearly. First is the triggering event.
What kicks it off?
Exactly. What actually activates here, right? Usually, like we said, is the landlord getting a bona fide written offer from a third party that they actually intend to accept.
So it can't just be them idly wondering about selling. It has to be real.
Correct. Real intent, real offer. Second, a clear notice requirement. The lease has to oblige the landlord to tell you, promptly and in writing, about that offer.
And just telling me isn't enough, right?
Definitely not. The notice must include the full terms of that third-party offer. Price, obviously, but also financing details. Is it cash? Is there seller financing involved? Contingencies like, are they dependent on selling their own house first? Inspection results? Proposed closing date? You need all the specifics to know what you need to match.
Okay, so they tell me everything. Then I need time to actually figure out if I can match it.
Absolutely critical as the third point. Response time. The clause must give you a reasonable defined period to make your decision.
How long is reasonable?
The source suggested 10 to 15 business days is often seen as fair and practical. It recognizes you might need to talk to lenders, partners, maybe an IRA custodian.
Yeah.
You can't make a huge decision like buying property in like 24 hours.
Right. Avoids a snap judgment on a massive commitment.
Precisely. Fourth is the matching terms requirement itself. Generally, you have to be ready to meet the key material terms of the offer you're being shown. Price is number one, but also things like the deposit amount, the financing structure, the closing timeline.
So pretty much mirror the offer they received.
That's the standard. Now, the material did note sometimes you might be able to negotiate a small window for minor adjustments if both sides agree, but the baseline assumption is you're matching the deal on the table.
And how long does this last? Is it just for the first year of the lease, or?
Good question. That's the fifth point. The term of the RFR.
Yeah.
You need to define its lifespan. Does it only last for the initial lease term? Does it automatically renew if the lease renews? Can you negotiate it for a specific number of years, say 5 years, regardless of lease renewals? If you think this is a long-term play, you want that ROFR to last as long as possible.
Makes sense. And there was one more piece you mentioned that sounded really strategic.
Ah, yes. Assignability. This one's often optional, maybe a point of negotiation, but wow, it can be powerful.
Assignability, meaning I can give my right to someone else.
Essentially, yes. It gives you the right to assign your option to purchase to another person or, more likely, another legal entity.
Like, I could assign it to an LLC I set up with a partner. Or maybe to my self-directed Roth IRA.
Exactly that. Or a trust. This gives you tremendous flexibility for how you actually structure the purchase if the time comes. Maybe you bring in an equity partner who buys through their entity. Maybe you use your retirement funds, which have specific ownership rules. Assignability unlocks those more sophisticated ways to get the deal done.
Wow, okay. That's a really comprehensive checklist. Trigger, notice, response time, matching terms, term length, and potentially assignability. Covers a lot of bases.
Yeah, it really lays out a clear process so everyone knows what happens if the landlord gets serious about selling. No ambiguity.
And the case study we looked at, Sarah, the STR Pro, really hammered home how this plays out in reality.
It's a perfect example.
Yeah.
So Sarah, she leased this nice craftsman house. It did STR Arbitrage. Crucially, she negotiated a ROFR into her lease, ran it successfully on Airbnb for about, 18 months. Great reviews, solid business.
Right. And then
the landlord gets a real offer, $325,000 from a third party.
And because of that clause?
Yep. Landlords follow the ROFR rules, gave Sarah written notice with all the details of the $325K offer. Her clause gave her, I think, is 10 days to respond.
Okay, clock's ticking.
Right. So Sarah scrambled, talked to her investor partner. They decided to go for it. They matched the $325K pay price. Crucially, they were using cash, which likely matched or simplified the original offer's terms, and they were able to commit and close the deal quickly, well within the ROFR timeframe.
So she didn't get kicked out. She didn't lose that listing.
Not at all. She bought the property, kept her furniture in place, kept her 5-star listing live, kept all those reviews. The whole operation transitioned seamlessly from tenant-operator to owner-operator.
Wow.
And the source made the point crystal clear. Without that ROFR, when that $325K offer landed, Sarah would have been out. Lease terminated, business gone from that location. Someone else would have likely bought it and benefited from the very business she built.
Just thinking about losing all that work, the setup, the reviews, the ranking, that one clause literally saved her business there and turned into an ownership opportunity.
It completely flipped a potentially disastrous situation into a wealth-building one. She gained full control over her cash flow and the asset itself.
So if we boil it down, the core value here for STR arbitrage,
It's that the ROFR costs nothing extra to negotiate into your lease up front. $0. But the potential upside, the control, the security, the optionality it gives you over your business's future, it's priceless, really.
yeah, when your entire business model hinges on using property someone else owns, you absolutely have to think about protection, about leverage, about keeping your options open.
And the ROFR checks all those boxes. Honestly, if you're doing STR arbitrage and you find a property you really like, one you see yourself running for years, getting a solid RFR clause negotiated is probably one of the smartest moves you can make.
It's moving beyond just thinking about the monthly rent to thinking about securing your long-term position with the property itself.
Couldn't say it better myself. The takeaway really is, don't just sign a lease and hope for the best. Lease it, build your successful STR business, absolutely. But then, lock in your right to potentially own that success down the road with the ROFR. Don't leave your future totally up to chance.